Welcome to Manifest, hosted by international evangelist, teacher, and author Perry Stone. Enjoy unique insight into prophetic and practical truth. It's time to feast on fresh manna, so get ready to be blessed and encouraged. And now, here is your host and teacher, Perry Stone.
I'm holding in my hand two pieces of paper that I have looked for about 8 years. My father told me this incident after it happened and called me long distance crying on the phone. I only know of Dad telling this story 2 times in his entire ministry publicly, and I've told it twice, both in military areas. In one military area where I shared this, a man came up to me and he said, "I can't tell you what I do. I work classified. But you gave a code name that's never been publicized in this story of your dad." So there was a real visitation. He also confirmed 3 other things that my dad would have never known. My dad was never in the military, although he respected the military. So before this message is over, I'm going to be sharing with you a visitation my father had. And the reason he wouldn't talk about it often is because he never wanted to tell people it was an angel. He was too humble to even say that. But it was a man that came to his house physically and disappeared in front of his eyes. So for the next few moments, we're going to deal with the subject of America, the preview of the end game. And I'd like to subtitle this, What I See Coming to America After 2016. Revelation chapter 3, verses 1 through 2. These things says he who has the 7 spirits of God and 7 stars. I know your works, how you have a name that you are alive and are dead. But be watchful and strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die. For I have not found your works perfect before God. I've often said this, that there are 3 types of Americans. There are Americans that are awake, there are Americans that are asleep, and there are Americans who are just spiritually dead. The Americans who are awake can discern the horizon that something bad is going to happen if it doesn't change. The Americans who are asleep cannot even perceive any danger whatsoever and think things are going to go on as normal. And the third group that I call the spiritually dead group, honestly, don't give a rip what happens as long as it doesn't affect their pocketbook. And so this is why we have the split in America, and we have one side that's warning, another side that's mocking, one side that's concerned, another side that is unconcerned, because a lot of this is based on the spiritual perception and the spiritual condition of the people in the nation. Now, what's going to happen to America? It's a question that I get as a prophetic teacher on the prophetic side of ministry quite a bit. I wish I could give you an exact, detailed answer, but I can tell you this. There are people that I have followed their ministry. I have known of these individuals that I'm going to be talking about in the next few moments who truly, truly heard from the Lord. People who fasted, who prayed, and walked with God. And for the first time, I can put together their stories, and things begin to make sense. Over the years, from time to time, I would share one story. Years later, another story. Years later, something about my father that God showed him. But it hit me just a few weeks ago before I was preparing for this summit that for the first time, all 3 of the stories from the 3 prophetic people I'm about to give you, which were revealed over a period of many years, is beginning to emerge in 2016 and 2017, or let me say it this way, possibly could be emerging in that time frame and stretching on into the next few years. So what I'd like to talk about is, first of all, say this to you. America is on a prophetic cycle. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me just explain it to you this way. First of all, America is on a prophetic cycle. It's on an empire cycle, and then it's on an east and west cycle. It's on a prophetic cycle because if you've heard me teach on this, which I don't have time to get into today before you, America is on a definite 400-year cycle that is based on Genesis 15 and the parallel of the message God gave to Abraham that his seed would be in captivity for 400 years and God would bring them out. It would take me 20 minutes to explain that verse and tie it into America, but if you followed our ministry, you've heard me talk about the 400-year cycle that climaxed ready on the year 2008 when I predicted to you in 2004 that on that cycle it would be transition and change. And our older partners remember me preaching that. Number 2, America is on what I call an empire cycle. An empire, actual empire, lasts last an average of 200 years, give or take a few years. Now, America, from our actual founding and independence, founding is over 400 years, but independence is over 200 years. When you look at where we're at, we're coming at the peak of an empire. And several things happen to collapse an empire. And one of the things is internal division, corruption in the government, uncontrollable debt, and tax increases that people cannot pay. That's part of what can wreck historic empires. So having said that, we're in an empire shifting, and the next major empire of Bible prophecy will be a seventh kingdom that continues a short space, and some suggest that may already be the EU that's beginning to have a little bit of a split and division in it. But we're coming into an eighth kingdom somewhere down the road, which is 42 months or 3.5 years, which I'm 100% convinced is an Islamic caliphate that will rule from the ancient Babylonian territory, but will control the majority of Europe, the majority of the Middle East and Northern Africa through violence and through control and through military weapons and weapons of mass destruction. That's where it's going to end up at the time of the end. But we're not quite there yet. Now, we're also on an east-west cycle. Every 500 years approximately, the power and influence is in the east, and then 500 years passes and it starts going west. Now, in the old day, before America was considered the West, that would have been Eastern Europe and Western Europe. It would have been the Western Hemisphere and part of the Eastern Hemisphere, which in that day was predominantly the islands, Africa, and Europe. So for hundreds of years, you'd have the East rising, then you'd have the West rising, you'd have an Eastern power rising and a Western power rising. And I think it was Pat Robertson that wrote about this, and he tracked it out perfectly, that America, 1492, when Columbus discovered America, and you discover that we're already shifting into an empire from the West, which has been America, Canada and America predominantly, and now it's going to go back to the East, and the East being the kings. Remember, the Bible talks about the kings of the East in the book of Revelation that rise to power. So the power and the influence and the economic power eventually has to come out of the Western Hemisphere of where we live, and has to shift over into what's called kings of the East. And that word East there means the rising of the sun, and this would be what the old-timers called the Asian tigers. This would include the Vietnam, it would include, it can include Korea, but it would include China and all of the Japan and those countries. So we see this is happening in front of our eyes. Now, having said that, the thing that concerns me the most about America, and Bill Cloud has masterfully taught this while we have been here, and Jonathan, I'm going to be skipping over some things, son, if you'll just kind of follow me on the outline. I'm going to go down to how long does God allow a warning to hold. I'm going to go to page 2. But what I was going to say is Bill Cloud has brought this out, that while we look in America to a person to solve the problems, how can you solve problems when the house is totally divided? In other words, if you have a solution, the other group doesn't like it. If they come up with a good solution, the other group doesn't like it, because if it's popular with the people, it means that you might vote the other group in for 4 more years or 8 years. And so politics has wrecked the country because it has become so internally corrupt. So God has been giving us warnings. He's been giving us warnings in the Word. He's been giving warnings through prophetic visions and dreams. I had a vision, and it was repeated in dream form every 4 to 5 weeks, of tsunamis hitting the east coast of the United States. In fact, I saw a specific city where a tsunami hit. And when I began to have this, I went on Facebook and I said, I've had this vision, and I was stunned. Do you know how many people, the thousands of people who said to me from all the different states and parts of the world, oh my, Brother Perry, we have had the same exact vision. We've seen it happening. They named the same cities I had not told them that I was standing in when I saw this huge tsunami hit the east coast of the United States. So I believe that we're getting warnings from the Bible first, warnings from the Spirit of God through visions and dreams, and then we're getting warnings from the pulpit. If you look at people who are walking heavily in the Spirit and in the prophetic, they're not over there smoothing it over, telling you everything's going to be hunky-dory, let's smile, we're going to have a great life in the future. They're telling people you better get prepared, get ready, get prayed up, because if we don't have a transition toward the things of God, there could be seriousness that would happen in the future. Now, you know, like I do, that you've heard warnings for years. So a question I had when I was preparing this message is, how long does God allow a prophetic warning to come to a particular nation before he then enacts the judgment that he's warning about? Is this a good question to ask? Now, let's just go back. First of all, I'm going to talk about Jeremiah because that's the pattern. But if we go back to the time of Jesus, and we estimate this, approximately 30 A.D., he warned Jerusalem, you're shedding innocent blood, you're killing the prophets, and because of this, your house will be left desolate. Now, in 70 A.D., the Roman 10th Legion came into Jerusalem, surrounded the city, took the city captives, killed 6,000 Jews at least. That's not counting the ones killed before the siege. And then burnt the temple down to the ground, took the treasures and the Jewish people captive. That happened in 40 years. Now, it's interesting that 40 years is a generation of unbelief, because in the book of Psalms, God says, I was grieved with this generation for 40 years, even that generation. So a generation can be different things. A generation, I can show you in the Bible, can be 70 years. A generation in the Bible in Genesis 15 can be 100 years. A generation of heaven and earth in Genesis 2 can be 1,000 years. 1,000 years with God is like one day like 1,000 years. But in the Bible, a generation of unbelief, Israel in the wilderness, Israel in the time of Jesus, is approximately a 40-year period. So could we say this? Could we say a warning can last for a generation? Remember the people, when Jesus was crucified, the people cried out, his blood be upon us and our children. Okay, they are the generation then, but the judgment didn't necessarily come at that moment. When did it come? It came on 40 years later, which would have been their children's generation. So in other words, can we say that? Well, the example I want to bring to you for the next few moments is the prophet Jeremiah. The prophet Jeremiah was a prophet that prophesied. He started prophesying in the year about 610 before Christ, 610 years before Christ. He was approximately 18 years of old when he began his prophesying, and he actually prophesied during 4 of Judah's kings. Now imagine this. This man gave warnings from age 18 till he was an older man under 4 different kings. That would be like me saying today, there's been warnings under President Bush and under President Clinton and under President Bush again, and then under President Obama. It would be like me saying that 4 presidents, we have been warned during 4 presidents of what's going to happen to America. So Jeremiah is warning these kings. One comes, one goes, one lives, one dies. But he starts seeing these weird things, and God tells him to enact prophetically and do some weird things. Walk around with a yoke around your neck. Go over there and take a pot of boiling oil and do this with it. He shows him good and bad figs. So the entire time he's prophesying, he's giving him dreams, he's giving him visions, he's giving him illustrated sermons. It's just like when Jonathan Cahn talks about the harbinger, he talks about the tree, he talks about the building. See, that's the visible sign of what you can see. So Jeremiah did all these visible signs. Now here's what began to happen to him. This is weird. He's a prophet. They know he's a prophet, and every time he starts speaking and giving a warning, they go crazy on him. And it's not, look, it's one thing for a bunch of people who aren't living right to go crazy on you, but when the people who claim to be living right call you stupid and a fool and tell you to shut up, that's bad. So the priests turn against him, and the Levites turn against him, and the elders turn against him. So he's over there blasting these warnings out to them. So here's what they do. They put him in stocks, and then they beat him up, and then they imprison him, and they throw him in a cistern. And then the false prophets start jabbing at him and opposing him and say, oh, Spirit of God's talking to you. Where went the Spirit of God from me? And they're mocking him. And so Jeremiah, here's what he begins to warn. First he tells the preachers, the priests, then he tells the people, and here's the warnings he gave. Number 1, God is devising evil against you. He says, all you're doing is what your imagination wants to do, and all the time God's going to devise an evil plan against you. He said, number 2, my people have forgotten me. He said, you have forgotten me so bad that you're burning incense that I'm not receiving, and you're praying prayers I'm not hearing. That's what Jeremiah told them. Number 3, Jeremiah told them this: your land is going to be desolate to the point that people are going to hiss, and hissing was like, shh, oh man, at the desolation which is coming. Number 4, you are building your high places, filling them with idols, but I will fill the place with blood. Number 5, he came to the temple court and he began to prophesy against the priests. Now watch what happens once he speaks to the preachers. Isn't it amazing that the preachers are the ones who aren't weren't listening to him. Once he speaks to the ministers, it says this in Jeremiah 21-2. Now Pashur the son of Immer the priest, who was of the chief governor in the house of the Lord, heard that Jeremiah prophesied these things, smote Jeremiah the prophet, put him in stocks that were at the high gate of Benjamin, which was by the house of God. They put him in stocks, and later they throw the guy in a dungeon. Now let me tell you what Jeremiah did. Jeremiah got depressed. He got so depressed, here's what he said. I will not make mention of God, nor speak any more of his name. Okay, he said, I've stopped. You don't want to hear it? Good. You don't want me to prophesy? Good. I will shut up and mind my business. Then he says in chapter 20 and verse 9, but it was like a fire burning in my bones. So in other words, he was so called of God that when they tried to shut him up, they couldn't shut him up. I have received phone calls from people I'm not going to tell you about in extreme high level places who got my number and said, I need to talk to you privately to give you information of something. But their information was this: you talk too much. Their information was this: you need to settle down. One guy told me, he says, get off the prophecy stuff, get on TV and smile, make everybody feel good, and the whole world will be following you because you're a good preacher. I said, the devil is a liar. He said, you can be popular. I said, God didn't call me to be popular. He called me to be obedient. And I'm like Jeremiah. Oh, I feel the Holy Spirit. I'm like Jeremiah. There's been times I got a message from God and I said, I really don't want to preach this. But I had an angel come to me in a dream in 1988 in the form of a man in a black suit. He was about 6'4", 6'5", solid white hair, ivory, olive skin, looked perfect, perfect complexion, and gave me 3 words from God. And one of those words is, God is going to bless you globally to reach the world, but you got to preach what he tells you to preach. And every time I'm about to open my mouth and say, I'm not going to preach that because somebody's going to get stirred, some partner's going to get mad, and a whole bunch of people are going to back up, I'm reminded what the Lord said. I'm your blesser. I'm the one that keeps you on television. I'm the one that's going to keep you. I'm the God that's going to preserve you. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And so I've made up my mind. Sometimes I'm like Jeremiah, but can I tell you this? It's a fire shut up in my bone. When I'm in that cave right back in there, and all of a sudden I begin to get a revelation from God that I feel like maybe I should keep it to myself. There's a fire that comes in me, and I got to stand up and tell it. I've got to stand up and preach it. And I know there's people that don't like it. I'm not preaching to 10 and 15,000 people in America because a lot of Americans don't want to hear it. But I got a crowd in this place today that's here because they come to hear what the word of the Lord is. They want to know what thus saith the Lord. And I've come by to tell somebody, I'm going to tell you in a little bit the end game of the United States of America based on the prophetic revelation. Give him a hand right now, if you will. So here's what I want to say to you. That when you look at the prophet Jeremiah, because I wanted to look at this and I wanted to say, okay, how long did Jeremiah prophesy? We don't know the exact time, but we know at least 40 years, at least that length of time and I'm talking about when the premier warning came, when the main warning came, that the Babylonians were coming, and he stayed on that warning. God gave him a generation. So I do believe this. I can't tell you where our warnings would start. I can't say they started in 1988. I can't tell you they were 98. I can tell you that 9/11 was a warning to us, okay? But I'm not going to try to sit here and pinpoint a date, because I can't give you a date when the first warnings came to America to be careful and to turn back to God. But I will tell you that based on what I know, that we're coming into a fullness cycle. 2016 will be a major cycle. From 2016, we're going to go into a phase that is a prophetic cycle, which is going to come from 16 to 20. I'm not telling you Jesus isn't coming during that time frame, or he is coming. I don't do things like that, but we're coming into a major cycle. So I would suggest to you that 40 years is going to be a time frame in which we will see a lot happen on the fullness of the warnings. And again, when it began, I can't tell you. When that 40 climaxes, I cannot tell you. But I will give you words of individuals that I believe are prophets. The first prophet that I want to talk about is a man that suddenly went to be with the Lord several years ago in a car accident near Palestine, Texas. There's a whole lot of strange parallels to how he passed away. And he basically, from what I understand, got on the other side of the road, totally by accident, was hit head on, and his name was David Wilkerson. David Wilkerson wrote the book, Set Your Trumpet to Your Mouth, and I can remember people reading it saying that will never happen in America. Everything the man wrote in the vision about America has come to pass. It is absolutely incredible if you've never read the book. Now, I'm going to share some things with you about what David Wilkerson saw. In 1985, in Set the Trumpet to Your Mouth, he said this: America is going to be destroyed by fire. Sudden destruction is coming and few will escape. Unexpectedly, in 1 hour, a hydrogen holocaust will engulf America. This is 1985. Now, I'm going to show you how all this is going to come together with 3 prophets that have given prophetic words about America. This is amazing. This nation will be no more. Later, he wrote, an attack from Russia. Now, this is the part that blew my mind, because I remember reading this, but I totally forgot about it. And when I found my dad's papers, I showed them to you just now. When I found the visitation that he had, and when I tell you what this is on here, it's going to come together. I want to get right into this. I want to get right into this prophetic part right now. The great Holocaust follows. In other words, this will follow an economic collapse of America. The enemy will make his move when we are weak and helpless, because America will not repent. Then, in September of 1992, all right, now this is years later, he experiences another vision, 1,000 fires in New York. I have a recurring vision that over 1,000 fires are burning at one time in New York City. I'm convinced race riots will explode. New York is now a powder keg ready to blow. Now, this makes sense when you understand that we're in such debt that after a while we're going to run out of people's money to pay the bills. If we print money, we go into hyperinflation, which means, as it did in Germany, a wheelbarrow full of money buys you a loaf of bread. In Germany, when hyperinflation hit, they asked to get paid every hour at work so they could cash their money in and buy stuff before the... So what, I have a stamp collection. A stamp may cost, let's say, a mark before it got bad. I have a stamp in my collection that costs 400 billion German marks for one stamp. People were burning money. People took their money out of the bank and burned it in wheelbarrows. Hyperinflation. So you can't go print money. So here's what he says is going to happen. Federal and state welfare cutbacks will be the spark that will ignite the fuse. 100,000 angry men will be on the streets enraged because they have been cut off from benefits, and fires will go everywhere. Please give me your undivided attention. I have in my hands what is the most significant prophetic word of 2016, and I want to make it available to you. The message is from the International Prophetic Summit with myself, Bill Cloud, Jonathan Cahn, and Mark Biltz. I want to give you some of the titles of what you will hear when you receive the CDs or DVDs. I preached a message called The Return of the Babylonian Spirits Controlling America's Politics. I preached a second message, and this is a very powerful, important message called The 5 Epicenters of the Apocalyptic Countdown. Where are the 5 centers of where all activity will be happening at the time of the end, including the United States of America? One message that it seemed people enjoyed immensely was Jewish festivals concealed in our last year in heaven. You will discover the last year in heaven and its parallels to the festivals of Israel, and how the festivals of Israel are actually concealed in the apocalypse. Another message I preached was America, the preview of our end game. And this is where I found the notes of my father that I've looked for 8 years, where an angel of God visited him, showing him something that would happen to America in the future. He wouldn't talk about it much publicly, but I felt led to share it with the people during this service and in this conference. Mark Biltz preached on God's day timer. He preached a second message called Solomon, a type of Messiah or anti-Messiah. And then Bill Cloud came along and preached on warning, the locusts are coming. Bill preached a second message called It's Open Season on Believers, and a third message included in our CD and DVD series, And You Shall Know, Entering the Age of the Messiah. Jonathan Cahn preached on the Shemitah template and began to show us how things were happening related to the Shemitah cycle and what will come in the near future. Now, there are 10 CDs or 10 DVDs in the albums. The CDs are $65 a set. The DVDs are $110 a set for your donation of that or more. And the CD offer numbers on on the screen, 16 PS CD. The DVD offer is 16 PS DVD. You can order online at perrystone.org. You can call our office or the 888-21-BREAD number, or Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320. This series from the International Summit is for those who want to know and desire to stay informed concerning the Word of the Lord for these times and seasons. Once again, CDs and DVDs, unedited, uncut. On TV, you only see about 22-minute clip. These are messages that are 60 to 70 minutes long. I want you to hear the entire message that I preached and not just a clip, because the main meat of the message is later on into it, and we have to edit certain things out of the television program. Get the unedited version right now of our CDs and DVDs. We're looking forward to hearing from you today. You know, throughout the year, one of the most popular offers that we have is the International Prophetic Summit, because people from throughout America, they love the teaching. It's a right now word. It's fresh information. I actually heard men teach subjects. The locusts are coming. The Jewish festivals concealed in the book of Revelation. It's open season on believers, the return of the Babylonian spirits, and you shall know, the epicenter of apocalyptic countdown, America's endgame, John Cahn's message. Get the DVDs if possible, because the speakers used a lot of PowerPoint pictures that are on the DVDs that are not on the CDs. Of course, the CD is the message only. The DVD, you see the pictures, the crowd, the PowerPoint, and so on. But if you get this material, it helps us keep the program on the air. Our resource material, we use it not only to bless you, but we use the income from it to help pay for millions of dollars of airtime to help keep the program on the air. We cannot keep Manifest going unless many of you who love the program stand with us. So thank you for your prayers and thank you for your support. I'm always excited to announce some of the meetings which are coming up. Maumee, Ohio, our big youth event, the Church on Strayer, is coming up in July. That'll be following that will be Louisville, Kentucky. Remnant will be with me at both of these events. Louisville, Kentucky, they're coming up to join me for that powerful Thursday through Sunday night service at Evangel World Prayer Center. 2 services on Friday and Saturday, and also all day Sunday. And we come loaded, man, with the Word of God to share it with people. And we want to bring a right now word. We love the altar services there, what God does. And then I keep emphasizing this, all the churches in the area, large and small, but especially the churches that have a rural youth church with maybe 5 young people, 8 young people, 10 young people, load them up in a vehicle, get them to OCI for Reformation this year in the month of July. And also, just a real quick word, we'll be coming back to Willis, Texas, Huntsville, Texas. We're coming to Griffin, Georgia, First Assembly of God for a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in the month of August. We haven't announced that yet, but we want to start announcing that. We're going to come back to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We've got a lot of places we're coming to. The best thing to do is go to perrystone.org and just check out the itinerary, and you can see all the different places that we're coming to. We got our main event coming up, man, in October. One of my favorite times of the year has always been our main event. And the reason I emphasize these events is people's lives are changed, lives are touched, people are baptized in the Holy Spirit, people bring their kids, family members that encounter God. We want this to be a God encounter place, and it has become that. So we give God the glory and the praise for everything He's done, but we also know that without the prayer partners and also the people who support Manifest, we could not keep the program on the air. We got a lot of great things happening, and you can follow me on Facebook, Perry Stone Ministries Facebook, or Periscope. And remember, we do not send out any friends requests on Facebook. You just simply go on there and like us. We have 300,000 people that follow us, and there's a lot of fakers out there posing as me. It is not me, so I want to just remind you of that as well. Okay, next week we'll be back with a teaching that I believe is going to be a blessing to you.
Perry Stone invites you to join him for his 2016 Israel Tour. The dates are November 21st through the 30th, with an optional visit to Petra in the country of Jordan. For more information and how to register, call 1-888-321-3629 or visit perrystone.org. Seating is limited, so call today.